Welcome, everybody, to our newest webinar from Desert Waters Correctional Outreach. I am Stephanie Rawlings, Deputy Director of Desert Waters Correctional Outreach, and I have some colleagues on with me today. First is our Executive Director and Founder of Desert Waters Correctional Outreach, Dr. Katerina Spinaris. I'm sure many of you have met her or know her or recognize her, and appreciate the work that she has done in correction staff wellness over the past 2 decades and more. My colleague Justin Stevens is here today too. He is our COO. I'm not going to get it right. I'm sorry. I don't have all COO. There we go. All right. And he will be helping us today advancing PowerPoint and running the technology, because I don't know about the rest of you, but when I do webinars, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So Justin's going to be helping us with that. And finally, our Director of Training, Chris Stanley. He is here with us as well. And we also see some other Desert Waters faces out there too. Brent Parker and Greg Morton. Welcome, guys. Good to see you. So today we're going to be talking about what it is that Desert Waters does. And a lot of the things that you guys may be familiar with already, and maybe some new products that you guys haven't encountered yet. Desert Waters has been around for over 20 years now, and Dr. Spinaris has done so much work and research with the help of other colleagues along the way, developing high quality correctional wellness training content, as well as many numerous free services, such as the webinars that you guys see us posting and that you're sitting in today. And so we've been going pretty strongly with our once a month webinar series for several months now. And one of the things that when we really started diving in, that we had not done yet with you guys was really introduce all of the things that Desert Waters does to support correctional agencies and staff. And so we wanted to take some time today to really dive in to what we do and how we can serve you through the various products that we have. And if you guys have any questions, we're going to have a time of questions at the end. And so Katerina and I are going to be trading off throughout this presentation. We would invite you that if you have a question throughout the presentation, please just go ahead and put it into the chat. And we have one of our team members that will be collecting all of those questions, and we will be answering them for everybody at the end. This will also be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel, so that if you have to exit the presentation before it's over, or you can't stay for the Q&A at the end, you can access it on our YouTube channel at a later date, and you'll be able to see the presentation in its entirety with the Q&A section as well. Always, you are welcome to email us at admin@desertwaters.com. So, and you guys can kind of see, if you can see in the very tiny print, we each have individual email addresses above our heads as well. So without further ado, we're going to dive in. Justin's going to bring up our PowerPoint for us. Thank you, Justin. Got to make a little adjustment on my end because I lost my chat. The screen share. All right. So who is Desert Waters? If you are not familiar with Desert Waters, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is based in Colorado. Why are we based in Colorado? That is a really neat story that Dr. Spinaris could tell you at another time. But what it amounts to was that she had moved to the Colorado area and very organically found herself in the middle of a huge prison population. There were like 15 facilities in her county alone, and she was a licensed clinical psychologist and therapist, and she began serving that county in that capacity. And what she found was that a lot of her clientele were correctional staff, and they had a lot of similar issues when it came to mental health and the stress and some of the disorders that can come out of working in corrections long term. Desert Waters has been around for over 22 years, founded in 2003, and some of you have a very lengthy relationship with Desert Waters. Some of you were brand new, but that is where Desert Waters originated and how we came to be. So our mission statement really dials in on improving the well-being of corrections and other public safety professionals through training, consulting, and other essential resources. And really what we're aiming to do is increase that resilience and address mental health concerns and the overall wellness of these challenging professions. As you guys know, working in first responder professions is incredibly challenging, and a lot of times there's not a lot of resources out there that address the very specific experience of working in corrections and first responder agencies. So that is what we are all about and what we're aiming to do with the work that we do. What we're hoping to do is really start to cultivate that healthier workforce. And as a lot of you know and are experiencing right now, staffing is a very critical issue in corrections, and a lack of staffing or a high turnover rate really also begins to impact the wellness of the staff who are still working there. And that may be through double shifts. That may, it could be impacting sleep. It could be impacting the amount of incidents that are occurring. It impacts programming and overall outcomes also for the populations that are being served in those facilities. And so what we're trying to do at Desert Waters is really through research, through corrections, specific training, through wellness training and program building, we are trying to increase that resilience and hopefully by default create that healthier workforce culture and retention as maybe natural consequences of improving the culture. And today we're also going to talk a little bit about our staff wellness accreditation program as well. So what are the correctional work challenges? I don't need to tell you guys what your specific challenges are in the corrections field. You know them well, you're encountering them daily. But back in 2000, Dr. Spinaris coined the term corrections fatigue. And what that really means is it's that negative cumulative and interactive effects of operational, organizational, and traumatic stressors on individual staff's personality, health, and functioning. And ultimately, obviously, that's going to impact the workforce culture. And I think the thing that really needs to be focused on here in this definition is that word cumulative. It's the day in and day out kind of, stress and drudgery of going into a facility, interacting with the same individuals, interacting in the same negative circumstances, combined with that operational stressors of working in a facility 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, organizational stressors, how we promote, how we hire, retention, turnover, all of those things organizationally. And then you add in trauma that is naturally occurring due to the environment that we're working in and the people that we're working with. And all of that is impacting individuals and the workforce as a whole. So what this looks like in kind of more of an illustrative slide here is you have those things that we just talked about, those operational and organizational and traumatic stressors. And those are really feeding into how our families experience our career, the overall culture that we're working in, as well as us as an individual. And results of those things kind of all interacting, and you can think of this as kind of a hurricane or a tornado, is it's kind of spinning down. And those consequences then are consequences of all of those things, those stressors interacting with those impacts right there, are resulting in declined health and functioning of our correction staff. And over time, that cumulative effect can be those negative personality changes. And this is if that corrections fatigue is left unaddressed. When you're not addressing the core issue of those stressors and how they're impacting the whole person and the culture, those outcomes in the middle of that tornado are a result of that. You also can go from the out. I've been in classes where we've also taught this from the outside in. If that corrections fatigue is bad and it's already there, and you have those individuals that are already dealing with declined health and functioning, personality changes, certainly that's going to affect individuals' culture and family impact. So really, you're just getting into that spin of corrections fatigue and how it has a huge lasting impact on both the staff individually, on the whole facility, certainly on the population that's being served, as well as their family members or those they're interacting with in their community. So how do we begin to address this? From Desert Waters Correctional Outreach perspective, these are the things that we believe need to be impacted for staff to achieve that wellness. And that is that we need system-wide engagement. We need a top-down, bottom-up, and side-to-side support within the facilities, within the system, of people who say, you know what? Wellness matters. We need to start talking about what's impacting our staff. We need to start addressing the issues that are impacting our staff. And we need to do it in a meaningful way, because that we know that throwing an EAP hotline number at our staff isn't working. That's not addressing things like domestic violence, divorce, early death, and suicide. We need everybody's buy-in for that to be a successful workplace culture change. We need wellness supporting policies. Involving everybody in the system includes involving people in policy, includes writing wellness into policies, includes making resources available, and not just available, but accessible. That is really a gap that I've seen over the years of working in this work, is that we're quick to say, well, yeah, they can do that, but is it accessible to them? Building out toolboxes, building out hazmat suits. What are we doing for prevention? It seems that we live on the side of reaction in corrections, especially when it comes to staff wellness. So there comes a point where you've got to play offense better than you're playing defense. Defense is expensive. It's liability. It's something's already happened. And so living on the prevention side with your hazmat suit is certainly going to be a much more impactful place to be. It's going to be a cheaper place to be. I'll tell you that. It'll be a cheaper place to live as well. Building out meaningful tools in that toolbox, and building out a curriculum and tools that can be a hospital for that type of issue for staff. We know that staff are afraid to speak out. We know that staff are scared to make those hotline calls themselves. We know that they're afraid to reach out for mental health support. We need to make that accessible. We need to take the fear away from it, and we can watch our staff respond and ask for that help. I would much rather have somebody raise their hand and say, you know what, I'm not mentally capable right now of handling this on my own. I need help. Than getting a phone call that says that employee took their own life. Because now that is going to have lasting impact on that employee's family, that workplace, his coworkers, friends, the community. That's not where we want to be. We need to get there beforehand and play prevention instead of reaction. And Dr. Spinaris is going to talk to us about how Desert Waters has contributed over the years to that staff wellness culture, and how you can begin to take steps to build that into your system.
Thank you, Steph. Much appreciated. And glad to say that after 22 years that we've been around, I see a lot more engagement in the area of staff wellness, a lot more recognition, a lot more investment of resources, bottom up and some top down. And that's wonderful, because we need everybody to be engaged and do what they can in their corner of the world. So what we as an outside nonprofit started contributing from way back was started with research. Let's go to the next slide. We started with research because people needed to see some numbers, that we were not just talking about something that was irrelevant, but that was hotly relevant and greatly relevant and desperately needed. So we needed to establish some foundation with data and then build trainings to respond to the needs that we saw in the research. And then we expanded into the whole thing of wellness accreditation, just because we need to have a way to measure if what we're doing is effective or not. And then the wellness programming is like, how can we help an agency build either from the ground up or expand and enhance what they already have in terms of wellness programming and be as comprehensive as they can at the time, given their budget. And we focused on educational publications. I really believe that in the power of the written word or the video, and it's important to have things available for people. Like, we have a bunch of stuff on our website. Like if somebody's scrolling at 3 a.m. or they're 3 a.m, maybe in the middle of the afternoon, and they're desperate, they may find something that says, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. I'm not going crazy. I'm just dealing with something that is understandable and acceptable in terms of compassion-wise, receiving some support. So we provide agency consulting about their programming. And the whole thing about staff and family support, we from the beginning saw that families were like collateral damage in a way. They were suffering alongside of the staff, and they were really clueless in a lot of cases, not having an idea of what was happening, why, how, thinking that some things were their fault. And the whole thing of advocating for staff, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and their families, because we feel like they've been in the shadows for a very long time, and they need advocacy. More people in their corner. I'm sure there are people in their corner, but more people about the sacrifices they make and the impact of certain working conditions on them, so that everybody will be better off if things like that improve. So that was over the years. We've been around a while. It didn't happen overnight, but that has been the vision, and it's growing. So let's talk a little bit about some of the research studies. And we have some on our website. You can go dig them up on our website. Some are unpublished. And we have 10 to date, and on mental health issues, and one other one about some other things about the efficacy of the training. But I'm going to talk about today the mental health issues and a little bit about physical health, because they are intertwined. So I'm going to share with you some data, I hope to make it comprehensible and just talk about the main points. The bottom line is that especially the correctional staff, the security custody staff, are, at least what people are finding repeatedly, in addition to our work, they're very wounded. And I'm not surprised. I mean, Stephanie talked earlier about the corrects fatigue process model of people being impacted repeatedly over years by different types of stressors on the job, with no resolution, no good tools, and how that affect people and change them for not the better. And so I was not surprised when I started getting those numbers, because I'd seen it when I was doing the therapy work. And by the way, I'm not a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a licensed professional counselor, just to clarify that, different license. And so let's go to one study that is on our website and look at some of the rates. And what I like about sharing this slide is that it has different populations of staff. From the custody staff is the light beige color, the maroon is the non-custody, and the green is probation and parole. And we have done some other work with probation and parole as well, and the other custody and non-custody, security or non-security, and we see the same pattern. The most affected always have been the custody security staff. They bear the brunt, and so they have the higher rates for different on screening instruments, which means questionnaires that are validated to screen people effectively. But still, for a final diagnosis, you need to have an interview with a clinician and to eliminate other issues and go more in depth. But screening instruments are a really good place to start. So we use screening instruments for studies like everybody else does. And for example, the post-traumatic stress disorder criteria are met by, in this study, were met by 41% of the custody staff. Whereas, and that is like for the last month's symptoms or signs. And just to contrast that for the general population out on the street, adults, for a whole year, the signs are suffered by, to meet criteria by 3.5%, 3.5% versus 41%. It's like glaring, shocking difference. For the non-custody, so that would be programs, clerical staff, administrative, 17% met criteria for PTSD on that instrument, and 11% of the probation and parole group. Still way higher than the general population out on the street of 3.5. And that goes on with depression. We had 20, in this study it was 24%. In a couple of other studies, we find it to be more like 32. And another study on the East Coast by someone else found it 32. So ours was a little low, but still really high compared to the 7% of the population for custody. And the pattern repeats for all the disorders. We tested like generalized anxiety, alcohol abuse, suicidal thinking. The higher numbers are always the custody security staff, followed by the non-custody, followed by probation and parole. And you can see, you can think about that, like probably less exposure to direct trauma for probation and parole and non-custody. All kinds of things may feed into that. And what kind of shocked me in that study was the anxiety, generalized anxiety for custody was 60%. It was like a lot of people extremely uptight, extremely anxious. And self-reported, these are all self-reported and anonymous. Self-reported alcohol abuse was 26% for the custody staff. And that's something we don't talk a lot about. And it's really one of the plagues in corrections. The other one is the sleep deprivation. But there's so much alcohol-based coping that people don't realize what the price they pay for that, because it's quick and easy and legal, and it takes its toll. And then we had suicidal thinking issues. 12% had suicidal thinking. That was pretty concerning. And for the custody staff. So that's some of the pattern. Let's go to the next slide just to share with you some other stuff from the same study. We also looked at how many people had more than one issue occurring at the same time. So think about that. Think like yourself walking with a backpack and you have like, I don't know, 60 pounds of rock in your backpack, but then all of a sudden of PTSD, then somebody else adds another 50 pounds of depression. So we found that custody, 20% of the custody sample we looked at were dealing with both depression and PTSD. And then were versus only 5% of the non-custody, huge difference. 1/4 of the non-custody had the same issue of double trouble, so to speak, depression and PTSD. And then adding generalized anxiety was 18% for the custody, 5% for the non-custody. And alcohol abuse on top of that, 8% of custody. So you can see how people become really vulnerable to suicidality, suicidal thinking when they're dealing with all those things and they have no relief and no way out other than maybe they're trying more alcohol, which digs a hole deeper. And again, the non-custody are better off, but still serious, having to deal with so much. And especially in a culture, if people don't feel safe opening up and saying that they needed help. So what we are looking at here is how people are overwhelmed and sometimes don't have a way out, and therefore they choose suicide because they feel nobody cares, nobody will listen, and they don't want to be embarrassed and humiliated. Although I see that in this last year or so, we have a lot more people openly seeking help, almost as a badge of honor, talking about having been diagnosed with PTSD because of work conditions or work events. But still, the majority still have this code of silence about their suffering. So let's go to another slide where we looked at who had one or the other or both conditions of PTSD and depression. And remember, these are heavy-duty debilitating conditions. I don't know if you've ever been severely depressed. I hope you never are, or if you've dealt with PTSD. They take a toll. So we looked at who may have one or the other or both. And what we found is very interesting. We kind of tabulated that by rate, and we found that the vulnerability to have one or the other or both was highest for security custody staff, followed by medical staff, which makes sense because they're exposed to things up front. They're in their face. They have to deal with the damage, the injuries, the threats. They have to deal with things hands-on, just almost like the custody staff. And then classification was next. And I remember looking at the classification scores for classification staff, and they had the highest depression rates of the whole bunch. And we had a pretty big sample, almost 3,600 people for that. And our thought was that classification staff have to read all those reports to classify, and maybe just reading so much negativity gets people down. Kind of indirect exposure to all that trauma and misery. And probation was close behind, and supervisors and parole. Mental health people were a little better off, clerical better off, and the least were the executive staff, having depression, PTSD, or both criteria that they met on those surveys or questionnaires. So let's go back. I know we're going backward instead of forward. Is there a reason for that? No, we're going backward. So do you want to start something? Right? Okay, let's go forward. Okay, maybe it was a good thing to review those things one more time. Let's keep going forward. Couple more. One more. Yeah, this is a very interesting line diagram. Whoops. A line diagram. We asked people about different things, like how many days they missed in 12 months, how many days for workers' comp, their tobacco use, doctor visits per year, health problems or they were diagnosed with since they became correctional employees, their life dissatisfaction rate, stress score, anxiety score, job functioning themselves, rating themselves for how they function on the job, their relationship functioning at home, how they dealt with their leisure time, their caregiver, like the children, pets, whoever, family, and then taking responsibility for their personal duties at home. And what we found was we divided our groups into four. One group had both PTSD and depression criteria that they met. The next one, they met criteria for depression. That was the green line. The PTSD is the light brown line, and then the light gray at the bottom is neither. So what we found was that people who had criteria met for both PTSD and depression did worse on everything. They had worse scores on everything. They were malfunctioning and showing worse scores along everything, across the whole series of criteria we're looking at. So that tells us that the most obviously burdened, broken, they need support. And depression was next, and then PTSD kind of overlapping some. And then the neither was at the bottom. You can see that line at the bottom. Big difference between the maroon line at the top and the kind of light gray line at the bottom in functioning. So that was just to see, just eyeballing what it looked like. So it was kind of a strong visual for us to see who had the greatest need. And we can go back to questions about that stuff later, guys. So let's go to the next slide, where we looked at what they call symptom clusters criteria. PTSD has 4 clusters of symptoms, and they each have a set of criteria, like 2 of one of the other, to meet the diagnosis, to get the diagnosis. So we looked at those 4, and we had 2 samples of COs. One is the maroon color, one is the light sand color. And the first one was arousal. They were the 76% in one study met criteria for arousal. And arousal may mean being really worked up. And we talked about being hypervigilant, having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep, being extremely irritable, ready to go off for no apparent reason, being hostile and hair trigger temper, that kind of thing. That's the arousal. So we saw that for both studies, arousal was number 1, where people met the most people met the criteria. 76% in one study, 64 in the other. The next one was negative mood and negative thoughts. People talk about entering a facility, an institution in corrections, and feeling the negativity hitting them in the face, and kind of. And I've experienced that too, walking in and feeling that heaviness. And if you have a bunch of people with negative moods and negative thought, yeah, you're going to feel that. So 67% in one study met criteria for that cluster of PTSD. What we're experiencing is when you have intrusive thoughts, when we have intrusive thoughts about a traumatic event, like you're walking, driving, eating, and all of a sudden you have that image pop up in your head. You don't want to see it, you don't want it, but it pops up nevertheless. That's in a kind of an intrusive memory. You're re-experiencing the event. It can be from that brief image in your head. It can be all the way to flashback. That could be the most severe. So we had quite a few meeting the criteria for experiencing. And then avoidance is when people will try to avoid either going places that remind them of that situation or thinking about something. And so it's external. Like I know people who had severe PTSD who were on workers' comp and they were on disability. They couldn't go back to work. They could not drive past they couldn't drive past the prison. They had to take a whole long way around to go someplace. They did not want to go past the gate because it gave them like panic attack to go past the gate. And others try to avoid their own thinking. And guess what is the number 1 tool for a lot of people to avoid their own thinking, their own memories, their own nightmares, which is for experiencing alcohol. So I think that's why alcohol is the number 1 coping mechanism for post-traumatic stuff, because it knocks people out and stops that re-experiencing and that anxiety for a little bit of time. So we just wanted to see how they did. And number 1 is arousal. So you can imagine somebody with that issue dealing with a stressful situation at work or at home, or at work somebody's annoying, screaming a lot, a difficult coworker, whatever, and the other person just going off because they're so hyper aroused, or at home, getting home and their kids are screaming and running around and they just lose it with their own children because they are right so close to the explosive point and can be even uncalled for. They may be fine, and the CO may be in that place of explosiveness for no apparent reason to an observer. So that was another way we wanted to look at what was going on. And so let's go for a couple of slides further. So another study that we did, and actually part of another study that we did, we found something that blew my mind in a way that makes total sense when you think about it, but I didn't expect to be so strong. We found that staff's relationship with other staff, especially their supervisor and coworker, immediate supervisor, direct supervisor, and coworker, strongly affected what we call the work health. Work health would be something like morale, feeling energized versus exhausted, emotionally or physically, pride in the job, that kind of thing. If they had conflict and negative interaction with their supervisor or coworkers, and to a lesser degree with those incarcerated, their work health was bad. But if they had good interactions, positive, encouraging, helpful connections, their work health was right up there, good. And then work health was like a key point. Their morale, pride in the job, whether they felt emotionally or physically exhausted or not, energized, if they were satisfied with the job, that affected what they took home. Their family health, how they interact with people at home, and their mental health, PTSD, depression, and all those things we talked about, or being well, and also their physical health. So it's one thing feeding into the next, but the foundation is those relationships, the culture with coworkers and supervisors, and like how supportive do they feel they are, how effective are those interactions, communication, respect, connection, trust, where are they? And it's like a domino, and then ends up going home. I was shocked to see those numbers and how strongly work health affected family health and mental health. I thought, oh my goodness. Yeah, we need to be doing something about that. Social health with relationships. That's why we created 2 courses for supervisors, for example, to be supportive, because we see that as critical. And it's one of my soapboxes. So thank you for listening to me about that. So I think, let's go to the assessment slide, the next slide. We created some tools for assessment. There's always much room to continue with that. But right now we have several things. We have the court fatigue assessment, if you want to go to the next slide. That has different sections, and people can use one section or all of them. And we have several actually PhD students right now doing the research, and we offer it at no charge as long as they let us know what they're doing and show us the data afterwards. And it's on our website. So that's the agreement, that people let us know what they find and use it according to the instructions. But they can use one section, maybe just the family section. They can use the whole thing. And we have a questionnaire on our homepage. If you scroll down, we have a questionnaire that's 16 questions, I think. And people can respond anonymously and just see where they're at and where they fall. And then we have 2 questionnaires for occupational stress that we use with our accreditation model, with safety net, at the baseline and also annually, to see what impact people are making on different areas of wellness by implementing certain programs. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come, God willing, about that, because these things are continuously refined, and there's no end to their being refined. So I think this is your turn, Steph.
Yes, ma'am. Well, real quick, that was a lot of heavy data that you just walked through. And I want to lighten the mood before we go into training. So I'm going to ask if any of you are into 90s trivia. Anybody out there into 90s trivia? Yes? Okay. So earlier today, my coworker said that my shirt looked very similar to that of a 90s music star album cover, and a shirt that this individual wore on an album cover of his 90s CD. You've got 10 seconds to dump in the chat who you think they were referring to before Justin will enlighten us with the photo. So I see some responses. Just want to make sure y'all are still following us after the heavy stuff there in the middle. Heavy but important, heavy but essential to talk about these things with our staff. So I see one guess. Can't see my shirt. It's a black and white checkered. Black and white checkered, really gray. I don't know. Black and Boy George case. You guys are on the wrong genre. Let me put you there. You're on the wrong genre. All right, Justin.
I think it's time I give it to him.
It's time. It's time. Enlighten them. Put that album up there. All right, here comes your answer.
There we go.
It's Garth Brooks, y'all. My esteemed coworker who loves to play trivia on Tuesday nights at the local radio station, during my first meeting of the day said, "Man, you look like Garth Brooks from '93." And they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong. All right, let's head into training. Just wanted to have a little fun with you guys. It's a hard time of day for me, and I know research sections are sometimes a lot of heavy. But now we want to get into what Desert Waters offers as far as staff wellness trainings, and really kind of like what sets us apart. There's a lot of training out there. Everybody's kind of dabbling in the wellness field right now. There's lots of webinars. There's, I know that a lot of departments are really into like the micro learning right now, wellness in 3 minutes or lunch and learns. And those are all great and they have a place. But a lot of what Desert Waters has focused on since inception is just really meaningful training that addresses the core issues of corrections fatigue and how they're impacting all of those many areas of an individual's life and workplace. So the foundations of our trainings are that they are correction specific, they are data driven, and they are really coming from a place of addressing the whole person. So we're looking at a holistic approach, not just the individual's responsibility, but the organization's responsibility, looking at it from an us and a we and all of us working in this environment together. They're prevention oriented. We are looking to get ahead of the issue and get out of that reactionary space. They're trauma responsive. We talk about the hard stuff. We address the environment. We address the incidents. We address those different traumatic experiences and how to be resilient from them, how to process them appropriately, and then we also have this skills based. It's not a rub your back and send you on the way and the sun will come out tomorrow. That's not what that's about. It's about developing the skills to increase that resilience. So as you look over at courses, we have our corrections, fatigue to fulfillment right there in the middle. And that's really where the bread and butter of everything at Desert Waters originated from, is that first CF2F course. And many of you are probably most familiar with that course. If you have gotten into any of the Desert Waters trainings, you know that is really the core course that addresses what fatigue is, how to build upon it. You may have recognized things like the 7 challenges for corrections staff or the ABCs of self-care. We talk about that in that class. Our Towards Corrections Fulfillment is a more condensed version of CF2F, but it is taught completely from the perspective of brand new staff. This particular course would live in your academies or your pre-service orientation trainings. It is much smaller in length, but addresses the issues from a very prevention standpoint. We're wanting to prevent that fatigue from setting in. Real life examples of different scenarios an employee could encounter that would normally increase fatigue, but instead skills on how to address those situations as they occur. Again, we also have the traumatic stress resilience skills trainings that are addressing as part of those two curriculums, but we also have a course geared towards supervisors. Our supportive supervisors course is really digging into setting the tone for wellness, how they experience fatigue in a different way, and supporting staff through the workplace culture and how vital that is. And if any of you are dealing with staffing issues right now, you understand that having healthy supervisors at that level, creating that healthy workplace culture, is imperative for retaining staff, for building resilience in staff. Then, of course, we have our course for peer supporters. This has really gained a lot of momentum in the last year. And this is, if you have a peer support team or you're thinking about a peer support team, they need quality training. I think it's, peer support has gotten to be kind of a buzzword in corrections and first responders. And training those peer supporters is essential. That is a huge tool for wellness for staff, but it also has liability if you don't have training. And so this has been I will tell you, I'm a trainer for this peer support training. I've dabbled a lot in peer support training. This is the best one I've seen out there that really covers peer support all the way through role plays, through policy building, through operational implementation, how your team works within your workforce. It has it all. And then finally, we have our correctional family wellness course, and there are 2 courses for that, one for the staff member and one for the adult family members, that really gets into the family dynamic and the family impact of corrections and corrections fatigue, along with that skill building, not just walking away, but also walking away with some skills and some tools to increase that family health piece. How do we deliver? We deliver in-person training. It's always my vote, but we understand we live in a virtual world. It's hard to bring people together in a classroom sometimes. So we have a lot of our offerings are available now online. We also train instructors. We have train the trainers. We have a certification program for many of our trainers so that you can deliver within your agency and your system in a way that's convenient and operationally feasible for you. So that's our train the trainer programs are available with 2 and 3 year certifications. I may have that wrong, Katerina. I'm sorry. I'm thinking most of them are 3. There we go. 3 years. I wasn't sure if we had a 2-year. We also have direct delivery. We can come and deliver the training directly to your staff. With one of our or 2 of our master trainers will come to you and deliver directly to your staff. And then most recently, we have converted some of our trainings into a self-paced virtual model. So you can complete modules in a way that's convenient for you, or your staff can complete modules when they have time, if you have a dedicated space for them to work through them at work, or they can do them at home on their own time as well. So our newest program and product at Desert Waters, actually our second newest, there's another one that's newer still, is our wellness program accreditation called Safety Net. So Safety Net is a staff wellness program accreditation, and Desert Waters, with the support of some accreditation colleagues, we have developed a holistic standards-based program that helps you understand if your staff wellness program is meeting all of the areas of a holistic wellness program. It is based on SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness that you can see listed there on the continuum. And we have this program and standards available for agencies of all sizes and budgets. And this accreditation program is really based on functional areas that look at what you have in place for program administration, how your program runs, how it is deployed to the workforce, what they understand about it, how it is it accessible? We talked about that a little bit earlier. You have it available, but is it accessible? Talking about functional area number 2 really dives into that prevention focus that I know you're getting sick of hearing me say the word prevention, but it's so important. And then lastly, our intervention. So how do you respond after something happens? What is the critical incident response from a staff wellness standpoint? What do those policies look like in supporting an employee after something has happened? So safety net accreditation is one of our newest products. If you are interested, you can certainly visit our safety net tab on our website and you can learn more about that program. We also have wellness program consulting. So wellness program consulting is important because I've been there. I was in charge of building, I've now been in charge of building 2 state agency wellness programs for staff. The most significant one being in corrections. And I can tell you it's very challenging and it's very intimidating. I did not have a consultant. I had colleagues that certainly provided some support, but it can be a very difficult and very stressful thing. It feels like a monster when you're first starting, depending on what you have available. Some of you have phenomenal wellness programs already operating. Others of you may be at the very beginning. And so we have developed some consulting for that called Safe Haven. So Safe Haven is our newest product from Desert Waters, and this is our implementing a staff wellness program. So we provide that consultation for agencies. It's customized for the agency's needs, agency size. What do they have for their budget, how to get started, also data driven. It's incremental. We're not expecting you to implement every single thing in a specific time frame. But the other thing I think too is that sometimes a really big challenge for implementing a staff wellness program is implementing something that's not a flash in the pan and creating that sustainable program. There's a lot of things out there I've noticed, especially since the end of COVID, that were shiny, shiny products, opportunity in the market, because everybody realized that there were significant stressors on the workforce during that time, and so it was kind of a cattle call wellness program time in our country's history. This is not what that is. We're looking at sustainable staff wellness solutions for the correctional environment. And how we coach agencies into that is to really help them understand what the wellness needs are for their agency. Are there gaps? Are there needs that they can address? Are there things that they have that they haven't even fully realized could impact staff wellness? I'll give you an example. When I got started, I realized that there was a very little known, hardly ever used policy on the books, but boy, did it cause a lot of fear. Well, we went in and revised that policy. Hadn't been updated in 25 years. Wasn't even relevant anymore. But man, we love to talk about it in our culture as being a barrier to staff wellness, even though it didn't even really get used or adhered to anymore. And so, helping agencies kind of identify those and what resources they have, leveraging resources they have, identifying resources they didn't know they had. We help with program planning and certainly implementation support. And then also what we want to do is like outcome measurement. Is it working? If it's not working, what adjustments need to be made? Where did we miss something? Did we find out something later that we didn't know up front? We want to help you measure whether or not that wellness program is impactful and really addressing the staff's needs and issues. We also have some publications. Many of you, if you follow us on LinkedIn, if you've been to the website, you know about a lot of these. We have books that are available for mass distribution for your staff. These are quick reads that are super relevant. They're stories about correctional staff and, what has worked for them, strategies to staying well, anecdotal. For me, it's always easier to read about somebody else's story. You may be familiar with When Home Becomes a Housing Unit. It was a collaboration with William Young. It's a great read, very impactful. I read it with my spouse the first time, and it really hit home in many areas. And then most recently, we've also, Dr. Spinaris and Daria Maya have developed a publication for correctional chaplains and kind of some strategies for addressing the spiritual health. And of course, our monthly publication called the Correctional Oasis. If you haven't been following this recently or forwarding to your staff, this is a free resource that is available on the Desert Waters website. I also post a link to it on LinkedIn every single month and Facebook. Many departments have gotten in the habit of forwarding to all of their staff every month. If you have any questions about how to use the Oasis within your system, please let us know. This is, if you haven't been reading recently, a lot of our articles are really addressing the current events happening in corrections. There have been some fire publications here recently of the Oasis. I try to highlight a specific topic when I post every month. We've addressed retention. We've addressed use of force. We've addressed moral injury. We've anything you can think of. We've highlighted in the last the Oasis has been going for 10 or 15 years, maybe longer. But I will tell you, the last 2 years that I have been involved, these have been really relevant topics. This is a great free resource to all of you. Also, if you have specific ideas of things that you think would be meaningful for us to address, please feel free to reach out, make a suggestion to us. We do have a suggestion tab on our website, or you can email us at admin@desertwaters.com. I think I'm handing it back over to you, Katerina, to close us out.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, the Oasis we started the first year we came into existence, so it's been ongoing for 22 years, and you can find past issues on our website, not all the way back, about 3 years, I think, back. It looked very different when it first started. It was 4-page hard copy. Now it's electronic. So let's talk about advocacy and other resources. We have proposed that we have the National Correctional Family Appreciation Week, the first week in June, like right after the first week of May, for the correctional officer and other staff appreciation week, to celebrate their families, because they are right there involved. And we've had several facilities, jails, departments of corrections that joined in and celebrated family members and sent thank you notes to home with staff, had some events. So I'd say let's keep going with the National Correctional Family Appreciation Week. We have the event line at desertwaters.com. We've had the event line, hotline, phone, and email for 8 years, but now we keep it as an email. And we also have a bunch of resources at no cost on our site, like staff stories, family member stories, for people to read and get some comfort, hopefully. And so they know they're not alone. And as far as future directions go, why are we doing this and where are we headed? The point is that really we all know that the correctional system in the United States is hurting very, very deeply. And it's almost like unsustainable, especially with the shortages of staffing. And we all talk about the need for prison reform. And what we're saying is that you cannot have prison reform without healthy staff. And conversely, you cannot have healthy staff without prison reform. So they depend on each other. And we need to be focused on that seriously with everything we've got. And the staff, especially the COs, are the backbone of the whole operation. And we need them well and showing up, truly showing up, and being healthy in every way conceivable. So, and there's so much more to say about that, especially about the whole thing of the partial chronic sleep deprivation that staff are undergoing now these days. And so our thought is that the staff wellness programming contributes to the agency's mission success, and eventually to the reform of the correctional system. And it's inherent to any success in the future. And all roads go back to staff wellness. Thanks, Stephanie, for making that statement. All roads go back to staff wellness. And so we're here. We want to contribute. We want to come alongside. We don't have all the answers, but we try really hard to keep current and to keep our finger on the pulse and provide relevant material that is truly helpful and give hope and tools and strategies for people to implement. And so we'll have a time for questions. If you want additional information, we have a Desert Waters app. Justin, do you want to go a couple slides forward? And you can download that on your phone. But we're here to listen to your questions. Thanks for your support. Thanks for showing up. And I wanted to say also briefly that next week, this is the only month since last March when we started our webinars. We're going to do 2 webinars. The next one next month is going to be on moral resilience, how to talk about the importance of making moral decisions in the middle of really difficult circumstances, confusing circumstances, ambiguous circumstances, group pressure, and all those things. And our issue of the March correctional ACEs will address that in a big way too. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, and we hope to see you again next week.